Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Nero Wolfe and the murder on the Adriatic Pearl. At 11 minutes past midnight, I was giving serious thought to whether a man could drown in milk when the telephone rang. Don't laugh. The glass was tall, the milk was cold, and after a day of juggling Wolfe's moods, Kramer's growl, and Fritz's culinary victories, a simple quart of Grade A had more to offer me than philosophy or sleep. I had my heels up on Wolfe's desk, eyes on the brass clock, and the world was at peace. Then the phone cut through like a buzzsaw on silk. In the Brownstone, telephones at that hour don't mean anything good. They don't bring warm words from long-lost relatives or invitations to sunrise picnics. They come in 3 flavors: corpses, criminals, or Inspector Kramer. And sometimes all 3 in one call. I let it ring twice, considering whether it was worth disturbing Wolfe's beauty rest. Wolfe, having retired at 11 sharp after his second bottle of beer and the last chapter of a Byzantine general's memoirs, would sooner welcome a howling banshee in his room than a midnight telephone. The third ring came with the kind of persistence that says the caller wasn't just leaning on the button by accident. I sighed, put down my milk, and reached. North 35th Street, I said, making it sound as crisp as if I'd been awake since dawn instead of considering a pillow. The voice on the other end was female, breathless, and too polished to be calling from a payphone in Yonkers. "Is this Mr. Nero Wolfe's residence?" "It is," I confirmed. "Archie Goodwin speaking. If you want orchids, come back between 9 and 11. If you want to confess murder, try the police. If you're selling encyclopedias, forget it. What's your flavour?" "I must speak to Mr. Wolfe," she insisted, the kind of insistence that comes with a maid, a chauffeur, and an allowance the size of Central Park. "It is terribly urgent. My husband is dead. I am Mrs. Gwendolen Verrill." I rolled the name around in my head. Verrill had a ring to it. Old money, 5th Avenue. Not the sort of surname you see scrawled on pawn tickets. "My condolences," I said. "But Mr. Wolfe does not rise for social calls, even funerary ones at midnight." "You don't understand," she pressed, her words catching. "He died tonight, aboard the Adriatic Pearl, a charity gala. He was laughing one moment, and 10 minutes later he was gone. The police are already there, but I cannot, must not, allow this to become what they will make of it. Mr. Wolfe must take the case at once." The Adriatic Pearl. Even I had heard of it. A floating palace of a yacht moored in New York Harbor, dripping with gilt fittings and scandal. When a man dies in a penthouse, it's tragedy. When he dies on a yacht like that, it's headline copy with a side of gossip. "Mrs. Verrill," I said, steady, "your husband's sudden demise may be newsworthy, but you can't expect Mr. Wolfe to leap from bed and dash to your rescue. He doesn't leap, he doesn't dash, and he certainly doesn't leave the house after dark, unless it's to the roof to scowl at stars. What you can do is come here tomorrow at 11, with all the particulars. Wolfe will listen, if the fee is fat enough." There was a pause on the line, filled with ragged breath and a hint of desperation. "The police will twist it," she whispered. "They always do. They will call it a scandal. I need Mr. Wolfe to control the narrative. Do you understand? He must not let them ruin Lawrence's name." I understood plenty. Society dames with husbands who keel over on yachts don't worry about justice. They worry about column inches and whether the ladies at the club will still nod politely at tea. "Mrs. Verrill," I told her, "if your husband was seen laughing 10 minutes before he died, that's a better epitaph than most get. Now, I'll book you for 11. Bring your pearls, your story, and a retainer Mr. Wolfe can't sneeze at. Until then, try to sleep." "But 11, I repeated, and hung up before she could make me regret it. I sat there a minute, the receiver heavy in my hand, listening to the rain comb the windows. Outside, Manhattan was slick with midnight, neon bleeding down wet pavement, cabs sliding by with tired horns. Inside, the Brownstone was quiet as a church, except churches don't have Wolfe snoring upstairs like a baritone organ. I finished my milk slowly. A man doesn't rush his last comfort when the night's just handed him a society widow with a corpse on a yacht. The funny thing about midnight calls is you never know if they're real or just someone's idea of a prank. But the way she said, "seen laughing," stuck like a burr. People who die suddenly rarely look joyful in the preamble. It was either the truth or a very pretty lie. I went into the hall and locked the door chain. Not that the city's millionairesses had a habit of storming in uninvited, but habit is habit. Fritz, snug in his bed since 10, wouldn't stir for anything short of a kitchen fire. And Wolfe, well, Wolfe wouldn't stir if the four horsemen galloped down 35th. That left me with the job of deciding whether to ring Kramer at One Police Plaza or let him find out from the morning edition. I decided to let him enjoy his beauty sleep. I went back to Wolfe's office, switched on the lamp, and pulled out a notebook. If Wolfe was going to be greeted tomorrow with a widow dripping Chanel and bad news, he'd want the facts neat, like Fritz's soufflés. I jotted down, call received 12:11 a.m. Caller, Mrs. Gwendolen Verrill, widow of Lawrence Verrill. Setting, Adriatic Pearl, luxury yacht, charity gala. Circumstances, husband seen laughing, dead within 10 minutes. Police already involved. Widow fears scandal more than investigation. Wants Wolfe to control narrative. Appointment booked for 11. I underlined laughing twice. People don't usually laugh themselves to death unless the joke's on them. Then I leaned back, hands behind my head, and thought about the Adriatic Pearl. I'd never set foot on it, but I'd seen pictures. Chandeliers swaying above champagne towers, deck railings polished to a shine, a clientele that treated prohibition like an inconvenient rumour. A world where men in tuxedos cut deals worth millions, and women in sequins smiled like cats in cream. It was a world Wolfe despised and I occasionally enjoyed. A corpse there wasn't just a corpse. It was currency, traded for influence, whispered about in drawing rooms. At 1 a.m, I killed the lights, shut the notebook, and went upstairs. My room on the 3rd floor was plain but comfortable. I lay there listening to the rain, wondering if Mrs. Verrill's pearls would rattle tomorrow as loudly as her nerves tonight. Sleep came late, but when it did, it came hard. At 8, the brownstone came alive with Fritz's quiet movements in the kitchen, the aroma of coffee and buttered rolls drifting upward. Wolfe's routine was ironclad. Breakfast in bed at 9, orchids from 9 to 11, and not even the president could budge him during those hours, which meant Mrs. Verrill's timing was perfect, or perfectly suspicious. By 10:30 I was back in the office, typewriter on the desk, notebook beside it. Wolfe's empty chair loomed, a throne awaiting judgment. I was halfway through a memo draft when the rain picked up again, rattling the windows like impatient fingers. At 10:59 the doorbell rang. I went to the door, pulled it open, and found the stoop shining wet under the drizzle. She stood there exactly as I'd pictured her. Tall, pale under a hat with a veil, eyes too bright, pearls at her throat like a declaration of wealth against the storm. I am Mrs. Verrill, she managed. Is Mr. Wolfe ready for me? He's ready when I say he's ready, I told her. Come in, Mrs. Verrill, and try not to drip on the parquet. She entered the office with the air of a woman used to drawing attention in any room. Pearls gleamed at her throat like a lighthouse in fog. Her perfume, expensive and unapologetic, trailed behind her as if it had its own calling card. Her face was a composition of sorrow and calculation, eyes moist, lips trembling, but the set of her jaw suggested she could handle Wall Street boardrooms if the occasion demanded. Mrs. Gwendolen Verrill, I said, ushering her to the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk. I trust the rain hasn't damaged the pearls. Her glance told me she didn't appreciate wit at her expense. I must speak to Mr. Wolfe at once. You and me both, I told her, and tugged the bell cord. Wolfe's tread was already sounding from the elevator, which made me wonder if he'd been lurking above, curious. He emerged, monumental in yellow silk house robe, settling into his chair like a king descending upon his throne. Madam, Wolfe said, hands forming a steeple, my assistant has apprised me of your call. You are bereaved. My condolences. She folded gloved hands in her lap, eyes darting between Wolfe and me. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe, but condolences will not restore my husband's honour. Lawrence collapsed last night aboard the Adriatic Pearl. The doctors say it was his heart. They are wrong. I know he was poisoned. Wolfe's brows flicked upward. Poison is not an easy word, madam. You are certain. He was laughing, she burst, laughing not 10 minutes before, and Lawrence never had trouble with his heart, never. He was vigorous, full of life. She paused, pressing a handkerchief to her lips, but her eyes betrayed calculation beneath the performance. I said, Plenty of men laugh themselves into early graves. Sometimes the joke's just that good. Her glare told me she found no humour. The police will call it natural, convenient. They will bury him and whisper about drink or debauchery. I will not have it. Lawrence had enemies, men who would profit from his ruin. Someone did this. I want Mr. Wolfe to prove it. Wolfe regarded her as if she were an exotic orchid in questionable bloom. Enemies. Specify. She rattled off a short list. Financiers who had clashed with Lawrence in deals, Claude Kitteridge, the yacht's owner, a rival banker named Roger Fenwick. Each name dripped with power and money, the sort of men who shook hands over million-dollar wagers while nibbling canapes. Pfui, Wolfe muttered. The rivalry of financiers is as old as avarice. But you say there was a gala? Yes, a charity event. The Adriatic Pearl was filled with guests, bankers, socialites, entertainers. There were jewels everywhere, diamonds, sapphires, rubies. My husband wore my diamond brooch upon his lapel. It was seen by many. When they carried his body away, it was gone. That landed like a cue ball on a glass table. Gone? I repeated. Yes. Her hand clutched her pearls tighter. It was an heirloom. I noticed at once someone took it, perhaps in the confusion. Wolfe's eyelids lowered, a sign he was interested despite appearances. So, your husband dies suddenly, and a jewel vanishes. These are not unconnected. But, madam, I must be plain. I do not chase baubles. I pursue truth. If your purpose is to recover a brooch, employ a pawnbroker's clerk. If your purpose is to learn who ended your husband's life, I may oblige, at a cost. Her lips parted. Cost. Indeed, Wolfe said. I am not a philanthropist. My work requires the full employment of my faculties and of Mr. Goodwin's legs, which are valuable. You must engage me formally, with a retainer commensurate to the labour. $10,000, cash, certified cheque, or bearer bonds. She gasped, the pearls trembling. 10,000! Less, Wolfe intoned, and I withdraw at once. Further, I caution you, if you prevaricate, if you withhold, if you embroider, then, madam, I shall abandon the matter, regardless of fee. I'd seen Wolfe in bargaining moods, but this was his operatic register, theatrical, booming, and immovable. She faltered, then drew a slim envelope from her handbag. She placed it upon the desk with trembling fingers. 5,000 now, the remainder within 2 days. Will this suffice? Wolfe considered, then inclined his head. It will. Mr. Goodwin, receipt, if you please. I pulled a pad, scribbled a receipt, and handed it over. She tucked it away as though it might shield her from further judgment. Now, Wolfe said, recount the events in order. Spare no detail. And she did. Her voice steadied as she painted the picture. The glittering yacht, chandeliers reflected in champagne. Her husband, radiant in tuxedo, raising a toast, laughter rolling across the deck. Then the sudden clutch at his chest, the collapse, the cry of alarm. Doctors rushing, guests whispering, the police summoned. Heart failure, they declared. But she saw malice in the timing. What of the champagne? Wolfe asked. It was poured by the steward. He brought it upon a silver tray. And who had access to that tray? Anyone, she said bitterly. It passed among a dozen hands, but, she faltered, but I saw Claude Kitteridge, the yacht's owner, near the steward moments before. A red herring or bait? Hard to tell. And your brooch? Wolfe pressed. It was still on Lawrence's lapel when he raised the glass. I am certain. Afterward, it was gone. Describe it. She did. Platinum, with a cascade of diamonds shaped like a crescent moon. Distinctive enough to recognize at once. Wolfe closed his eyes. So, we have two mysteries, a man who dies laughing and a jewel that vanishes in the tumult. It may be one act or two, or neither. We shall see. Mr. Goodwin will make inquiries. She exhaled, relief fluttering across her face. Then you will take the case. I have already, Wolfe said. But recall my condition, deceive me, and I abandon it. Now go, and permit me my orchids. Mr. Goodwin will attend to arrangements. She rose, gathering her perfume like a cloak. At the door she paused, turning to me. Mr. Goodwin, do you believe me? It was a tricky question designed to trap me into sympathy or cynicism. I smiled. Lady, if I didn't, I wouldn't have written the receipt. She left, her heels tapping like exclamation points on the parquet. Wolfe pulled the bell cord. Fritz entered with coffee on a tray, placing it with reverence. Wolfe sipped, then said, Archie, her grief is tinctured with fear. The brooch matters, but not as she claimed. It is a lever. We must find who she hoped to move with it. I asked, You think she's lying? Wolfe snorted. Not lying, selective. Truth trimmed like a hedge. Phooey. Attend to it. Speak with the police, survey the yacht, and report. Now, let me to my orchids. He rose, robes flaring, and departed for the elevator. I was left with the scent of perfume, the echo of pearls, and a notepad full of trouble. The widow had been half grief, half theatre, but the missing brooch was no stage prop. Somebody had killed her husband, or had the decency to time a heart attack with a perfect toast, and somebody had lifted diamonds off a corpse. Either way, the Adriatic pearl was going to earn its name. I drained the last of my milk, crumpled the receipt carbon, and reached for my hat. Wolfe had his orchids. I had legwork. And if Mrs. Verrill's story was more performance than truth, I'd soon be applauding the wrong suspect. By the time Wolfe finished his orchids and descended to lunch, I already had my marching orders. Mrs. Verrill had given us enough to stir Wolfe's interest, which is like saying a match had been struck in a dynamite shed. The big man wouldn't move from his chair, naturally, so the job of stretching my legs toward the Adriatic pearl fell to me. He called it inquiry. I called it hoofwork with a side of seasickness. At 1 o'clock sharp, Fritz presented Wolfe with squab and wild rice while I settled for coffee and a sandwich. By 2, I was in a cab heading south, hat pulled low, drizzle streaking the windows. Manhattan Harbour was grey and brackish, the kind of place where money dressed itself up in gold trim to keep from smelling the salt and oil. The Adriatic pearl loomed at dockside like a cathedral on water. Her hull gleamed white, her decks glimmered under brass railings, and the whole package screamed, "Only millionaires allowed." The gangplank was roped off with a patrolman posted, and I could see movement on deck that promised the police weren't just sipping cocktails. I flashed my license card and my grin. Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's office. I've come to offer my condolences to the decor. The uniform looked uncertain, then let me pass. Inside, the yacht was a mausoleum of champagne and perfume. The air still carried roses from last night's centerpieces, mingling with the sharp bite of tobacco and something less pleasant. Death leaves its own scent if you know it. I wasn't 3 steps into the gilded hall when a familiar growl cut through. Goodwin. Of course. If there's a stiff within 5 miles, you'll be sniffing around. Inspector Kramer, his cigar clenched so tight it looked like it might sue for damages. His eyes narrowed at me with the same affection a cat gives a dog. Behind him loomed Stebbins, bulkier than ever, arms crossed. "Inspector," I said, cheerful. "I came to see if the yacht needs redecorating. Thought I might recommend new drapes." Kramer barked a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You can tell Wolfe this isn't one of his parlour games. A man dropped dead of heart failure. That's it. No story, no mystery." "Sure," I said. "Except his widow just bought Wolfe's services cash on the barrel, which means whether it's a mystery or a stomachache, we'll be poking around." Kramer's face reddened. "She did what? That woman?" He cut himself off, grinding the cigar. "Listen, Goodwin, you get in our way, I'll have Stebbins here toss you in the harbour. Clear?" "Crystal," I said, though I'm not much of a swimmer. I drifted past them, taking in the scene. The ballroom deck was all gilt mirrors, crystal chandeliers, and plush carpet that could have swallowed a horse. A long bar lined one wall, champagne flutes arranged on racks. And there, faint but visible, a dusty trace on the rim of one rack, a powdery residue that didn't belong. I bent as if admiring the glassware. My fingertip came away with a chalky smear. Arsenic had that kind of whisper, though I'd leave confirmation to Wolfe's palate. "Admiring the glass?" drawled a voice behind me. I turned to face Claude Kitteridge, owner of the yacht. He had the kind of face you don't trust, sleek, with a tan that said, "Florida Winters," and a smile that never touched his eyes. His suit was cut within an inch of its life. His tie sparkled with a diamond pin. "Beautiful, isn't she?" he said, sweeping a hand toward the room. "The pearl is the envy of the coast. Lawrence Verrill was proud to toast here. A tragedy, really. You knew him well, I asked. Well enough. Business acquaintances, social obligations. He was ambitious. Perhaps too ambitious. The smile tightened. I'm sure the inspector will confirm it was natural. A shame, but natural. That word again. Natural. Everyone loved natural deaths when money was involved. Of course, I said. And your role last night? I was host, he replied smoothly. I circulated, ensured the guests were entertained. I didn't stand watch over every glass of champagne. His eyes flicked to the bar, then back to me. Excuse me, I must attend to my crew. He slid away like oil on water. Red herring, or a man too slick to leave fingerprints? In the lounge, a piano gleamed and a sultry voice hummed from a woman perched on the edge of a chaise. Elise Fontaine, nightclub chanteuse, hair black as midnight, dress still shimmering with sequins. She was rehearsing her grief with the same skill she rehearsed torch songs. You're Archie Goodwin, she said without being introduced. Wolfe's man. I knew you'd come. The widow always runs for help. News travels fast on floating palaces, I said. She gave a languid smile. News, gossip, scandal. It's all theatre. Poor Lawrence. He was enjoying my song 1 minute. And the next, poof, the music dies. She snapped her fingers. You see anyone tamper with his glass? I asked. Darling, men are always tampering with glasses at parties. Refilled, emptied, swapped. It's a ballet. But no, I saw nothing. She leaned closer, voice low. Though I heard Roger Fenwick and Lawrence arguing earlier, loudly. Money, women, I couldn't tell. You should ask Roger. Which was convenient, because Roger Fenwick was lounging nearby, foppish in pinstripes, twirling a cane he didn't need. He looked like a man auditioning for a villain's part and enjoying every second. Verrill was reckless, he said when I cornered him. Always overreaching. He made enemies. But poison? Please. It was his heart. Everyone knew it. His widow didn't, I said. Widows rarely know their husband's weaknesses. I assure you he was fragile. I told him so myself. His smirk deepened. Perhaps he should have listened. If he was trying to sound innocent, he was rehearsing the wrong lines. By 4 o'clock, the Pearl was buzzing with uniforms, reporters sniffing outside, and suspects spinning tales. I'd collected 3 things worth Wolfe's attention: a suspicious smear of powder, a slick yacht owner dodging questions, and a singer who tossed blame like confetti, plus a banker rival who might as well have signed a confession in sarcasm. I made my way back to the gangplank, Kramer intercepting me with his cigar smoke. You tell Wolfe from me, this isn't one of his puppet shows. The DA's office says natural death, and that's what it'll be. Sure, I said, stepping past. I'll tell him you said so. He'll embroider it with Latin and hang it on the wall. Stebbins growled something about anchors and cement shoes, but I was already descending to the dock. The drizzle had thickened into rain, slicking the harbour lights into smeared neon on the water. Behind me, the Adriatic Pearl gleamed like a temple built for vanity. Inside, a man had laughed himself into the grave, a jewel had walked off a lapel, and somebody was counting on the police to call it natural. As for me, I had powder on my finger, and Wolfe waiting at the brownstone. The game was afloat, and the Pearl was about to earn her reputation. I flagged a cab and headed back uptown, rehearsing the report Wolfe would demand, word for word, before his 8 o'clock dinner. And if he didn't like the flavour, well, he could always wash it down with beer. When I got back to the brownstone, the rain had followed me uptown like a bill collector. By the time I stepped into the office, shook my hat, and hung my coat, Wolfe was already settled behind his desk, the yellow silk house robe draped across him like imperial banners. As usual, the elevator had delivered him back from his orchid chambers at noon, and the look he gave me said he'd been waiting with all the patience of a man who considers time wasted, unless he's spending it on food or flowers. Well? He demanded, fingers steepled. Well, I said, the Adriatic Pearl is still floating, which proves it wasn't all poisoned champagne. I met the dramatis personae. Shall I begin the roll call? Do so. And brevity, Archie. Me? Brief? That hurts. But fine. I dropped into my chair, flipped open the notebook and gave him the digest. First, Claude Kitteridge, the yacht's owner. Slicker than a midtown barber with a new jar of pomade. He glides, smiles, and avoids straight answers. He swore he had no idea what Verrill was drinking, but he was close enough to the bar to breathe on it. Next, Elise Fontaine, chanteuse, sequins, and sultry stares. She claimed she saw nothing except Fenwick arguing with Verrill, which conveniently directs suspicion away from her. Third, Roger Fenwick, rival banker, smug as a cat in cream, said Verrill was reckless, overreaching, and destined to keel over. Either he's guilty or rehearsing for a villain's audition. Fourth, the steward, nervous type. Hands shook like he was carrying nitroglycerin. He brought the champagne tray. When Verrill's name came up, he nearly swallowed his tongue. Wolfe's eyes half closed. Envy, greed, opportunity. The old trinity. Elaborate. I obliged. Kitteridge had motive. If Verrill was muscling into his territory, getting rid of him on his own yacht would be poetic. Elise? Maybe blackmail. She likes men with fat wallets. Fenwick's motive's obvious. Rivalry. And the steward? He's either guilty or scared stiff because he saw something he shouldn't. Fritz chose that moment to appear with a tray. Afternoon coffee, punctual as church bells. He'd added a small plate from the kitchen, delicate as poetry, which Wolfe accepted with a grunt of approval. With haricots verts and a sauce that made me want to apologize for ever eating hamburgers. Wolfe inhaled the aroma and allowed himself a small, satisfied grunt. I was less fortunate. Fritz had allotted me a plate that was generous by ordinary standards, but a pale cousin to Wolfe's portion. I narrated the injustice with appropriate bitterness. Finance and jewels, Wolfe mused between mouthfuls. Unhealthy companions. Each corrodes the other. Finance demands calculation, jewels demand vanity. When combined, they make bait dangled in a shark tank. Someone always bites. I said, in this case, somebody bit hard enough to drop Verrill and steal his wife's diamond brooch for dessert. Wolfe wagged a finger. Do not assume the theft was an afterthought. Often, Archie, what seems accessory is essential. The brooch may have been the object, and the death the distraction. That's one expensive distraction, I said. Still, the widow swore he was wearing it during the toast. Afterward, gone. Either somebody slipped it in a pocket while he collapsed, or he pawned it seconds before he dropped, which seems unlikely. Pfui! Wolfe wiped his lips with a napkin. The steward interests me. A servant in such circles must perfect the art of invisibility. Yet you say he trembled when Verrill's name was spoken. That, Archie, is not invisibility. It is betrayal of nerves. Attend to him further. I jotted it down. Wolfe liked his observations written as if dictated by a Roman emperor. Kitteridge, Elise, Fenwick, steward. 4 suspects. You want me to rank them? No. Wolfe drained his glass of beer, set it down with finality. I want you to consider context. A yacht is a stage. Guests play roles, servants provide scenery, and the owner controls the script. Verrill's death disrupted the performance. Ask yourself, who benefits from rewriting the ending? I leaned back. Fenwick, if Verrill's downfall boosts his bank. Elise, if she was bleeding him for cash and feared exposure. Kitteridge, if Verrill threatened his prestige. The steward, well, unless he's planning to buy his own yacht, I don't see the profit. Unless, Wolfe said, he was agent for another. That trembling may conceal obedience, not guilt. I considered. Or maybe he just had a bad oyster. Archie. Wolfe's glare could have curdled milk. Do not reduce analysis to flippancy. Sorry, it's a defect of character. Wolfe dabbed his mouth, leaned back, and closed his eyes, which meant the discussion was paused until digestion approved further speech. I filled the silence by typing up my report, the clack of keys a counterpoint to the rain outside. The suspects' faces lined the page. Kitteridge slick, Elise sultry, Fenwick smug, steward shaky, and over them all the missing brooch sparkling like bait on a hook. At 1:30 Wolfe stirred. Archie, summon Saul Panzer, quietly. He will trace the brooch. Pawnshops, fences, jewellers. If it has surfaced, Saul will find the ripple. Consider it done. Meanwhile, you will continue to cultivate the steward. Fearful men blunder. He may reveal more than he intends. I nodded. And if Kramer catches me poking around? Wolfe's lips curled. Inform him that I have been engaged. If he persists, remind him the district attorney is not omnipotent, nor is he immune to ridicule in print. Lon Cohen will be receptive to details. That was Wolfe, never just 2 moves ahead, but playing chess while the rest of us were still setting up checkers. Very well, he concluded, signalling with the bell cord. Fritz reappeared. collecting plates. Wolfe reclined, hands upon his stomach, the case already unfurling in his mind like an orchid opening to the sun. For me, the next step was less poetic. Track down a nervous steward who might know more than was healthy for him. The brownstone was warm, filled with the fragrance of Fritz's cooking and the faint rustle of Wolfe's sighs. Outside, Manhattan's financiers were circling, sharks in silk ties, and somewhere among them swam a killer with a taste for diamonds. As I closed the typewriter and stacked the pages neatly, Wolfe murmured, eyes still shut, "Archie, do not be gulled. Remember, envy and jewels glitter alike, but only one cuts flesh." That was my dismissal. He rose, slow and regal, and drifted toward the elevator for his 4 o'clock orchid session. I watched the doors close and muttered, "Fine, you take the orchids, I'll take the sharks." At exactly 3:15, when I had just finished arranging my notes from the Adriatic Pearl into something resembling a report Wolfe might deign to scan before bedtime, the telephone rang. This time it wasn't midnight, but the sound still promised trouble. Trouble at the brownstone didn't check the clock. "Goodwin," I said, crisp. "Archie, it's Lon," came the familiar drawl of Lon Cohen of the Gazette. Lon had a way of sounding casual even when his words carried the weight of tomorrow's headlines. "You boys are sitting on a whale, aren't you?" I leaned back, twirling the pencil. "Depends what you mean by whale. If it's champagne and caviar, you're a day late. If it's scandal, you might be on time." "Scandal, yes," he said, voice dropping. Words drifting out that Lawrence Verrill didn't just keel over from a faulty ticker. The whispers are poison, arsenic in the champagne, and something about missing jewels. I kept my voice even. "Funny, the police haven't confirmed anything like that." "Since when has that stopped anyone?" Lon chuckled. "There's already a draft headline on the night desk. Yacht gala ends in death and diamonds disappeared. You want to give me a line, Archie? Even a no comment would smell like blood." "You'll get nothing but a polite invitation to wait," I told him. "And if you print poison before it's official, don't expect Wolfe to send you orchids." "Orchids don't sell papers," Lon said dryly. "Dead millionaires do. Oh, and another thing. My source swears that Elise Fontaine, the chanteuse, left the yacht early, clutching a velvet pouch like it contained the crown jewels. Care to explain?" I jotted it down, though Wolfe would scowl at a journalist's tip as if it was spoiled cream. "Velvet pouch. Noted. You planning to run it?" "If I don't, someone else will," he said. "Archie, this one's hot. Be ready." I hung up, shaking my head, and carried the news to Wolfe. He was reclined in his chair, robe spread like a flag, eyes half shut in thought. He opened one just far enough to aim it at me. "Well?" he said. "Well," I echoed. "The press are sharpening their teeth. Lon Cohen just called. They've got the works. Poisoned champagne, missing jewels, and Elise Fontaine seen fleeing with a velvet pouch. They're already drafting headlines." "Confound them," Wolfe muttered, his tone like thunder trapped in velvet. "Journalists. Voracious scavengers snatching at carrion before the coroner arrives. Phooey." "You're not wrong," I said. "But if they print it, the widow's going to look like a woman who hired you to cover scandal, not solve murder." "Exactly." Wolfe pressed the bell cord with a flick of his wrist. When Fritz appeared with afternoon coffee, Wolfe accepted the cup like a monarch receiving tribute, then went on. "This premature exposure imperils clarity. Facts become distorted by conjecture, motives are misinterpreted, and the police are." The "R" was timed perfectly with the office door swinging open. Inspector Kramer barged in without ceremony, hat shoved back, cigar blazing like a torch. Behind him trailed Stebbins, looking as though he'd swallowed the harbour whole. "Wolfe!" Kramer roared. "What the devil are you doing? I told you to keep your nose out of this. And now the Gazette's printing poison and jewels all over page 1. Wolfe's voice dropped an octave, silk rapping steel. "Good afternoon, Inspector. To what do I owe the violation of my threshold?" "You know damn well," Kramer snapped. "The widow's hired you. She's spreading stories, and you—" He stabbed the cigar in my direction. "You're out there sniffing around the Pearl like a bloodhound on city time." "Correction," I said pleasantly. "I'm sniffing on Wolfe's time, and last I checked, the city hasn't paid my salary once." "Cut the wisecracks, Goodwin." Kramer turned back to Wolfe. "I'm warning you. Drop this case. Official cause is heart failure. If you muddy it with this poison garbage, I'll haul you in for obstruction." Wolfe sipped his coffee, set it down with deliberate grace, and folded his hands. "Inspector, I do not yield to threats. My services were retained by Mrs. Verrill. I am bound to her, not to your office, not to your district attorney, and certainly not to your temper. I will investigate." "You'll regret it," Kramer said, face redder than his tie. "I can get a warrant. You know that. Search this place top to bottom. You think you're untouchable." "Phooey," Wolfe waved a hand. "Search if you must. You will find nothing but orchids, books, and the detritus of civilized living. Hardly grist for your mill." Kramer slammed a fist on the desk. "Damn you, Wolfe. Every time. You twist it until I look like the villain. If you've got information, hand it over. Otherwise, stay out of my way." "I will convey information when it is information," Wolfe said icily. "Not rumour, not conjecture, not the prattle of journalists. Until then, I owe you nothing." The silence that followed was heavy enough to press the wallpaper flat. Stebbins shifted, glaring at me like he wanted to test his knuckles. I offered him a friendly smile, which only made him grunt. Finally, Kramer jammed the cigar back between his teeth. "Fine, but you step 1 inch over the line, Wolfe, and I'll bring the DA down on you like a hammer." He spun, cape of smoke trailing him, and stomped out, Stebbins lumbering behind. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the glass. I exhaled. That went well. He only threatened 3 warrants this time. We must be improving. Wolfe closed his eyes, hands steepled again. The inspector blusters. He knows he cannot silence me. His bark is the echo of frustration. But this Elise Fontaine, Archie, the velvet pouch, that detail must be confirmed. "I'll track her," I said. "But what if it's another red herring? She could have been clutching lipstick for all Lon Cohen knows." "Red herrings are instructive," Wolfe replied. "They reveal who cast them and why. Pursue it." I tapped my pencil against the notebook. "Sure, Elise Fontaine, chanteuse with secrets, velvet pouch, possible jewels, Fenwick with his smug grin, Kitteridge smooth as butter, and the steward shaking like a leaf. Quite the cast." "And the play," Wolfe said gravely, "has only begun. Continue, Archie. Extract substance from shadow, and do it before the Gazette transforms this case into pulp for the masses." He leaned back, signalling the conversation was over. The office was still thick with Kramer's smoke, though Wolfe's orchids upstairs probably smelled sweeter. I stacked my notes, snapped the notebook shut, and muttered, "Great. I chase chanteuses, soothe stewards, and dodge reporters. Wolfe drinks beer and fumes at journalists. Division of Labour, 35th Street style." Wolfe opened one eye. "Archie." "Yeah?" "Do not underestimate the press. They are both predator and pawn. A careless line of print may obscure truth more effectively than a lie." With that, he shut his eyes again, drifting toward contemplation. I looked at the phone, half expecting Lon Cohen to call back with another headline. Outside, the rain slicked Manhattan into silver and shadow. Inside, Wolfe had declared war on conjecture, and Kramer had declared war on Wolfe, which left me, as usual, in the middle. It was just after 9 when I set out, which is not the hour Wolfe prefers me roaming the city, but since his orchids had him occupied until 6, and dinner had him prisoner until 8, that left me to work the night shift. Fritz had fussed over my plate of veal and potatoes at dinner, and Wolfe had worked his way through trout with dill as if digestion were more vital than murder. Afterward, he dismissed me with a grunt, and instructions to extract the truth from the chanteuse. That meant Elise Fontaine, the nightclub warbler with enough sequins to blind a searchlight. The club was on the west side, a joint that leaned into neon the way a drunk leans into a lamppost. A sign blinked Fontaine's in pink letters, as if she owned the place. Saxophone riffs leaked through the door, low and smoky, with a bass line that matched the beat of a tired heart. The bouncer at the entrance gave me a once-over, decided I didn't look like a prohibition agent, and let me slide in. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew. Smoke from cigars, perfume from dames, and the faint tang of gin poured too liberally. The stage was a postage stamp in the corner, lit by a single spotlight. Elise Fontaine was perched on a stool, crooning into the microphone with a voice that wrapped around the room like velvet. Her dress shimmered green under the lights, clinging in ways that made half the men forget their wives and the other half forget their wallets. I took a seat at the bar, ordered a glass of milk, which earned me a sneer from the bartender, and waited for the set to end. Elise worked the crowd with practiced ease, eyes darting, smiles flickering, making every man in the place believe the next verse was just for him. When she finally slid off the stool, the room erupted in applause that rattled the glassware. I intercepted her near the hallway that led backstage. "Miss Fontaine?" She turned, lips curving into something between recognition and amusement. "Goodwin, I wondered how long it would take you." "I try not to rush ladies at work," I said. "Spoils the mood." She tilted her head toward the backstage door. "If you're here to ask questions, at least buy me a drink first. A girl gets parched under the lights." I followed her to a corner booth, ordered something less embarrassing than milk this time, ginger ale, and watched her settle gracefully across from me. The sequins flashed as she leaned back, cigarette poised in fingers like ivory. "So," she said, exhaling smoke in a deliberate plume. "The widow has engaged Wolfe, hasn't she? I could smell it on her perfume this morning. She can't help herself." "She does have a talent for hiring help," I admitted. "But I'm here for your story. Why did you leave the yacht early?" Her smile sharpened. "Because men can't keep their hands to themselves. A jealous patron thought my song belonged to him alone. He made a scene. I left before it became unpleasant." "Convenient," I said, "especially since Verrill died right after." Her eyes narrowed. "You think I poisoned him with a love song? Don't flatter me. Lawrence Verrill was already on the edge. I just happened to be there when he toppled." I let silence stretch, watching her squirm. She flicked ash into the tray and leaned closer. "Besides, you've already heard the gossip, haven't you? About me leaving with a pouch?" I raised an eyebrow. "You carry velvet pouches to all your engagements?" She reached into her bag, produced a small pouch the color of midnight, and dropped it onto the table. "This one, I assume." I untied the string, poured out the contents. Rhinestones, glass beads. Cheap costume trinkets that might fool a drunk under bad lighting but wouldn't pawn for cab fare. "Not exactly the Hope Diamond," I said. Her laughter was genuine. "Darling, do you think I'd parade stolen jewels through a crowd of policemen? That pouch holds stage props. I switch them between songs. My dresser knows, my pianist knows, half the audience knows. Only fools think they're real." Red herring, all right, the kind you fling to foul a wake. Somebody wanted her painted guilty, but the pouch was smoke and mirrors, and we keep moving. "You expect me to believe you had nothing else in it?" I asked. "You may believe what you like," she said coolly. "But if I had stolen Mrs. Verrill's diamonds, I wouldn't be sitting here showing you rhinestones. I'd be on a boat to Havana." Fair point. Still, her tone had edges. I tried a different angle. "You mentioned Fenwick and Verrill arguing." Her lips curved again. "Men with money always argue. About deals, about women, about pride. Fenwick was jealous of Verrill's success, or maybe of his wife. I didn't pry." "You pry plenty," I said. She laughed again, low and husky. "Touché." The waiter dropped off our drinks. I let her sip before pressing. "So, you saw nothing unusual with the champagne? No one near the steward, no sleight of hand?" She shook her head. "Only the usual ballet of glasses. Men lifting them, women forgetting theirs on tables, waiters swapping trays. If poison was there, it was invisible, and if jewels disappeared, they didn't pass my way." I studied her a moment longer. She was calm, too calm, but it could be the calm of someone who had nothing to hide, or everything. When she finished her cigarette, she rose. "That's all I have, Goodwin, unless you'd like me to sing you a confession, but it won't be in tune." I let her go, pocketing the pouch just in case. She gave me a smile over her shoulder that promised trouble for anyone who followed. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, robe spread like a Roman senator's toga, eyes shut in repose. I set the pouch on his desk. "Costume jewelry," I reported. "All rhinestones, no diamonds. She claims she left the yacht because a jealous admirer got grabby. The pouch was the red herring the press loved. Fenwick and Verrill argued, but she's not pinning anything else on him." Wolfe opened his eyes, one at a time, and regarded the pouch with disdain. "Phooey, rhinestones. The world is cluttered with false brilliance. Worthless." "Like most nightclub singers," I said. "Archie." Wolfe's tone sharpened. "Do not let cynicism dull analysis. She may be truthful. She may also be adept at deception. Either way, she was made a target, deliberately. You mean someone wanted it to look like she stole the brooch? Precisely. Wolfe closed his eyes again. The thief is cunning enough to plant suspicion on a woman whose reputation is already ambiguous. That, Archie, is the true clue. I leaned on the desk. And you want me to confirm, press further, but not tonight. Tonight I digest. He reached for the bell cord, summoning Fritz with the evening beer. I watched the foam settle in Wolfe's glass and said, Fine, you take beer, I'll take neon smoke and sequins, division of labour. Wolfe grunted, which in his language was both approval and dismissal. I left him to orchids and beer, but the pouch of rhinestones stayed on his desk, sparkling weakly under the lamp, like a clue that knew it was pretending. The call came just before 6, as I was considering whether Fritz's veal stew was worth risking Wolfe's wrath by sneaking an early sample. The phone shrilled, I answered, and the voice on the other end belonged to Lon Cohen again, his words tumbling over each other with the excitement only a newspaperman gets when death strikes twice. Archie, Fenwick's gone, dead in his Wall Street office. Cyanide, they're saying. For a second I thought he was pulling my leg. Fenwick? Roger Fenwick? The same smug banker who told me yesterday Verrill's heart was weak? The same, Lon confirmed. Collapsed at his desk this afternoon. Office boy found him. Police are swarming the place, reporters too. And listen, this isn't just another banker kicking off. They found a note. I stiffened. Note? Typed. Single line, pearls sink fastest. The words clung to me like wet wool. I muttered something non-committal and hung up before Lon could squeeze a headline out of me. Then I went into Wolfe's office, where he was already seated, Trout and Dill dispatched, beer in hand, waiting for me to provide the day's entertainment. News? He asked, raising an eyebrow at my expression. News, I said. Roger Fenwick is dead. Cyanide. Police are crawling all over his office, and the Gazette will have the story in print before the ink's dry on the autopsy. Wolfe's lips pressed into a grim line. Cyanide. How inelegant. And there's more, I added. They found a note, typed, Pearls sink fastest. The glass of beer paused halfway to his mouth. He lowered it deliberately. So, not an isolated incident. A pattern. Someone is orchestrating a sequence. Financial titans as targets. Verrill on the yacht. Fenwick at his desk. Both prominent, both rivals, both reduced to carrion. I leaned against the desk. Somebody's making a point. Maybe about corruption, maybe about power, or maybe just somebody with a grudge and access to poison. Archie, Wolfe's tone was sharp, do not trivialize. A pattern is a noose. It tightens until it strangles the city itself. Finance is delicate, panic is its poison. 2 deaths already stir tremors. More, and you will see collapse. Thanks, Alexander Hamilton, I said. But we deal in murder, not markets. And right now the list of suspects just shrank and expanded at the same time. Wolfe closed his eyes, fingers steepled. The note, Pearls sink fastest. An illusion. Verrill died on the Adriatic Pearl. Fenwick's death is tied to his, a maritime metaphor entwined with finance. Whoever wrote it seeks drama as well as death. He brooded while I typed the facts on Wolfe's machine. Roger Fenwick dead, Wall Street office, cyanide. Typed note, Pearls sink fastest. Possible link to Adriatic Pearl and Verrill case. Motive widening, beyond personal feud. Pattern? I was halfway through when the brownstone doorbell rang with the kind of insistence that meant law enforcement, not delivery boy. I opened it to find Inspector Kramer, his cigar clenched like it had personally wronged him, and Pearlie Stebbins behind him, bulldog expression intact. Goodwin, Kramer barked. Where's Wolfe? In the office, trying to enjoy his beer. Try not to spill it. They stormed in. Wolfe looked up without rising. Inspector, to what do we owe this intrusion? You damn well know, Kramer snapped, slamming his hat on the desk. Fenwick's dead. Cyanide. And I'll bet my pension it ties back to your case. Don't play dumb. I rarely play, Wolfe said smoothly. But yes, Fenwick's demise confirms what I suspected. A pattern. A pattern? Kramer's eyes bulged. 2 men dead, poisoned, and you call it a pattern like it's embroidery. This is murder, Wolfe. Big murder. And if you've been holding back information... Inspector, Wolfe thundered, voice rising like a judge's gavel. I hold back nothing. I convey information when it is ripe, not half-formed conjecture. As for Fenwick, I had no foreknowledge of his fate, nor, I assume, did you, though he died in the heart of your jurisdiction. Kramer's face reddened. Stebbins shifted like he'd enjoy turning me upside down for loose change. I said, "Easy, Inspector. We're all shocked. Fenwick didn't strike me as the cyanide type." Kramer turned on me. "Don't wise off, Goodwin. This case is bigger than Wolfe's ego. Wall Street's rattling. The DA's breathing down my neck. If you two clowns muddy the waters—" "Pearls sink fastest," Wolfe interrupted. Kramer blinked. "What?" "The note," Wolfe said. "Typed. Found near Fenwick. Pearls sink fastest. You know this." Kramer swore. "Damn journalists. I was hoping to keep that quiet. Of course you heard." "I did," Wolfe said serenely. "And it means whoever orchestrates this intends more than murder. He intends spectacle. He stages his crimes as parables." Stebbins grunted. "Or maybe he's just nuts." "Possibly," Wolfe conceded. "But a lunatic does not select targets of such consequence. These are deliberate acts. Verrill on the yacht, Fenwick in his office, finance and jewels, sharks devouring each other." Kramer jabbed his cigar. "Then help me catch the shark. If you know anything, spit it out, or I'll haul you both to the DA." Wolfe's eyes glittered. "I know only this. The deaths are linked, and the widow's diamond brooch is entwined. But I require more. Mr. Goodwin will obtain it." Kramer exploded. "Goodwin. Always Goodwin. He's not a cop. He's not sworn. He's a damn gumshoe running errands for you. This is my case." "And yet," Wolfe said calmly, "you are here, shouting in my office, demanding my help. Reflect on the irony, Inspector." The silence crackled. Then Kramer shoved his hat back on, smoke wreathing his head. "Fine, but if I find out you're sitting on something, I'll bury you both, you hear me?" "Clearly," Wolfe said. Kramer stomped out, Stebbins lumbering after, muttering about nutty notes and sinking pearls. The slam of the front door rattled the brownstone's windows. I let out a long breath. Well, that was cozy. Fenwick dead, Kramer ready to throttle you, and a typed note suggesting our killer moonlights as a poet. What's next? An opera? "Archie," Wolfe said, reaching for his beer, "this is no opera. It is a symphony of corruption. The widow sought to preserve her husband's reputation. Instead, she has unleashed a calamity. More deaths will follow if we do not intervene." I frowned. "You think more bankers are on the list?" "Unquestionably." Wolfe drained his glass. "Someone is culling the powerful, draping death in metaphor. Pearls sink fastest. The Adriatic pearl, Verrill, Fenwick. There will be more." "And our job?" "To stop it," Wolfe said, "before panic consumes the city. Attend to it, Archie. Tonight, prepare a memorandum of all suspects, their connections, their financial entanglements. Tomorrow, I will dictate inquiries. We will chart the current before the tide pulls us under." I sighed, reached for the typewriter, and rolled in a fresh sheet. Wolfe leaned back, massive fingers drumming his stomach, eyes closed in thought. Outside, neon dripped on the wet streets, and somewhere downtown, Wall Street's towers trembled at the news of another corpse. Inside the brownstone, the click of keys filled the office as I typed names, motives, and metaphors. The killer had written one line: "Pearls sink fastest." Wolfe meant to compose the rest of the story. By 9 the next evening, I was nursing a glass of milk at a riverside diner whose floorboards creaked every time the waiter sneezed. My quarry was the Adriatic Pearl's steward, a stringy fellow with the nervous energy of a cat in a kennel. Wolfe had declared orchids sacred from 4 to 6, and dinner sacred at 8, which meant the legwork fell squarely to me. My orders: observe, extract, and return intact. Wolfe's phrasing made me wonder if he thought I might come back missing a limb. The steward, name of Daniels, slid into a booth by the window, eyes darting like he expected the shadows to bite. A minute later, a man joined him, too shadowy for a banker, too polished for a dock worker. They spoke in low voices, hands tight around coffee mugs. I slid into a booth near the back and pretended to study the menu. My performance as a casual diner didn't impress Inspector Kramer's bulldog. I spotted Pearly Stebbins slouched at the counter, a newspaper in his fist. Subtlety was not Pearly's long suit. He looked like he'd swallowed the paper just to disguise his scowl. He was tailing me, which meant Kramer was still convinced Wolfe and I were skating too close to the fire. I strolled over, leaned on the counter. "Evening, Pearlie. The crossword in that paper tough tonight?" He grunted. "Don't flatter yourself, Goodwin. I'm not here for you." "Sure," I said. "You just happen to enjoy riverside diners with lousy pie. How's the blueberry?" He growled, which was his way of saying he'd rather chew nails. Back at the booth, Daniels was sweating through his collar. His companion leaned in, muttered something, then slid out the door without a backward glance. Daniels stayed, staring into his coffee like it contained absolution. I made my move, dropped into the seat opposite. "Evening, Daniels," I said. "Mind if I join the pity party?" He jolted so hard he nearly upended the mug. "Mr. Goodwin, I—" "Relax," I said. "I'm not the police. That's Stebbins over there. He's the one who eats witnesses for dessert. I just want a friendly chat about champagne." He swallowed hard. I don't know anything." "Sure you do," I said lightly. "You carried the tray. You saw someone near it, and someone paid you to keep your trap shut. Trouble is, silence doesn't come cheap in this town, and sometimes it doesn't come safe. So why don't you ease your conscience and tell me what you saw?" His hands twisted the napkin into a rope. I didn't want trouble. He said he'd kill me if I talked." "Who?" Daniels shook his head violently. "I never saw his face, but I saw his hands, his cufflinks, gold anchors shining." That landed like a stone. Gold anchors, unique enough to mean something. "Anchors, huh?" I said. "That narrows it down. You should have mentioned it sooner." "I couldn't," he whispered. They paid me. Said if I kept quiet, nothing would happen, but now Fenwick's dead. They'll think I told someone." His eyes darted. I can't go back." I leaned in. "You don't have to. You just have to keep breathing long enough for Wolfe to hear this. After that, we'll see." Behind me, Stebbins stomped over, looming like a thundercloud. "What's this, Goodwin? You working a witness without a badge?" I looked up innocently. "Come on, Pearlie. I'm just having coffee with a friend. Daniels here was telling me about his love of nautical jewellery." Stebbins' eyes narrowed. "Anchors," he growled. "You said anchors." Daniels paled. I didn't." Pearlie leaned down. "Spill it, or I drag you to Kramer." Daniels' voice broke. "It was a man in a tuxedo. He switched the glasses. I swear, I saw the cufflinks, that's all." Stebbins shot me a look that said he'd like to handcuff me too. "I'll be taking him in. You've meddled enough, Goodwin." "Be my guest," I said. "But remember, he talks easier over Wolfe's beer than in your squad room." Pearlie snorted. "Beer don't loosen tongues, fear does." He hauled Daniels up by the arm and steered him toward the door. Daniels stumbled like a man headed to the gallows. I left money on the table, stepped into the night. The river wind was sharp. Neon lights from the piers smeared across the black water. Stebbins bundled Daniels into a waiting car, then turned back to bark. "Stay out of this, Goodwin. Next time I find you poaching witnesses, I'll plant you on a bench until Kramer's done chewing." "Careful," I called after him. "If Kramer chews too much, he'll ruin his cigar." The car roared off, leaving me with nothing but the echo of Daniels's words. Gold anchor cufflinks. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in his chair, robe loose, eyes glinting over a half-empty glass of beer. He looked up as I reported, every word crisp. "Gold anchors," he repeated, savouring it. "A symbol of the sea, of loyalty. Anchors moor ships, yet in this case they moor guilt. Excellent, Archie." "Glad you approve," I said. "Stebbins has Daniels in custody, so don't expect him for dinner." "Pfui! The police will batter him with threats and bluster. He will say little, but we have what matters. Description, token, symbol." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Gold anchors. That narrows the field." "And widens the trouble," I muttered. Wolfe drained his beer, set the glass down, and tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared with a tray, the aroma of coffee trailing him. Wolfe accepted it like a priest at communion. "Archie," he said, "prepare a memorandum of Daniel's words. Exact. Do not embellish. Tomorrow we shall tug the anchor chain and see who drowns." I pulled paper into the typewriter, the keys clacking as I typed. Steward Daniels, diner by Riverside. Witnessed tampering with champagne tray. Saw cufflinks, gold anchors. Paid to keep silent. Now fears for life. I set the page neatly on Wolfe's desk. He glanced at it, nodded once and closed his eyes. That was the ritual. He retreated to orchids, I to my milk, and the night to its own shadows. The cufflinks glittered in my head as I shut down the typewriter. Anchors, meant to hold ships steady. Anchors, dragging men down. Somewhere in Manhattan, a killer with gold on his sleeves was laughing at the tide. By the next morning at 11, Wolfe had completed his sacred orchid hours and returned to his desk with the air of a monarch forced to sit through peasant petitions. I was waiting with a glass of milk and news that was worth at least a raised eyebrow. Anchors, I said, not the kind that keep boats steady, the shiny kind you clip to your sleeves. Daniel swore he saw gold anchor cufflinks on the wrists of the guy who tampered with the champagne tray. Wolfe's lips twitched. Distinctive. Distinctive enough, I continued, that I found out where to look. Claude Kitteridge, the yacht magnate himself, is known for sporting gold anchors. Not only that, he gives them out as gifts to close friends. A little club of maritime musketeers, all flashing their wrists like they own the Atlantic. Wolfe's eyelids lowered in thought. A token, then, not merely adornment, symbols of loyalty bestowed by the patron. Anchors bind ships, and so bind men. Or hang them, I said. He opened one eye. Catalogue them, Archie. Every recipient. Compile a list. The cufflinks may have been meant to confer privilege. Instead, they will confer guilt. I sighed, reached for the typewriter and rolled in paper. Fine. Claude Kitteridge at the top. Then his lawyer, a shipping executive, and a banker pal, names courtesy of a gossip columnist who swears he's seen the set at 3 different banquets. I'll keep digging. Maybe we'll find out who's missing a piece of jewellery. At 2 that afternoon, I paid Kitteridge a call. His office overlooked the harbour, the walls lined with model ships and framed photos of him shaking hands with senators. He welcomed me with a smile that looked like it had been carved by a taxidermist. "Mr. Goodwin," he said smoothly. "Always a pleasure. You're here for Wolfe, I presume." "That's right," I said, sinking into a leather chair. "And Wolfe would appreciate some answers, starting with your taste in cufflinks." Kitteridge's smile held. He lifted his wrist deliberately, letting the sleeve fall back. There it was, a gold anchor, gleaming under the light. "I take pride in them," he said, "custom-made, a gift I bestow only on trusted associates, a small fraternity of men loyal to the sea and to me." "Nice fraternity," I said. "Shame one of your brothers was near the champagne tray the night Verrill dropped dead." His eyes flickered. "That's absurd. I never touched the tray. I was busy with guests, as any host should be." "Funny thing," I said. "Your steward remembers anchor cufflinks. He's scared enough to sweat blood. Either he's lying through his teeth or someone in your club poisoned a banker while you poured champagne." Kitteridge leaned forward, voice silk over steel. "I assure you, Mr. Goodwin, I did not poison Lawrence Verrill, nor did I instruct anyone to do so. If some other man with cufflinks acted improperly, it was without my blessing." "Then you won't mind telling me who else has them?" He hesitated, then rattled off names. His lawyer, Vincent Hale, a shipping executive, Martin Greaves, and Roger Fenwick, dead Fenwick, had owned a pair too. I whistled. So Fenwick wore anchors himself. That makes him either the guiltiest man in town or the most convenient corpse. Kitteridge's jaw tightened. "I tell you again, I never touched that tray. My cufflinks are symbols, nothing more." "Symbols kill just as dead as poison," I said. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened as I typed up the list and read it aloud. Claude Kitteridge, yacht magnate, still has his pair. Vincent Hale, attorney. Martin Greaves, shipping exec. Roger Fenwick, banker, deceased. Wolfe grunted. 3 living, 1 dead. Convenient indeed. And you say the steward swore to anchors near the tray?" "Word for word." "Then," Wolfe said, "either Kitteridge lies or one of his chosen betrayed him. The fraternity of anchors becomes a fraternity of wolves." "Present company excluded," I said. He ignored me. "1 cufflink missing. That is the key. If we find the owner of a solitary anchor, we find the killer." "Easier said than done," I told him. "People misplace things all the time." "Phooey," Wolfe waved a hand. "Men of means do not misplace gold. They flaunt it. Find the absence, Archie. It will be conspicuous." He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared with a tray of coffee and petit fours, which Wolfe accepted like a judge receiving tribute. "Archie," he said between sips, "tomorrow at 9 I will be with my orchids. Use the morning well. Pursue Hale and Greaves. One of them will betray himself. I leaned back, stretching. Fine, I'll track them down, but don't be shocked if Kramer beats me to it. He's already suspicious enough to shadow my milk runs. Let him, Wolfe said. The inspector blusters. We act. That was the dismissal. He closed his eyes, the case already taking root in his mind. I stacked my notes, shut the typewriter, and muttered, Anchors away, let's see who sinks. When Wolfe decided the time had come to let Saul Panzer stretch his legs, he did it with the gravity of a general dispatching his best scout behind enemy lines. It was the morning after our little anchor episode, and Wolfe had finished his orchids at 11 sharp. He summoned me to the office, lowered himself into the throne and declared, Mr. Panzer will trace the brooch. There is no man better equipped for such a search. Contact him. So I did. Saul, flat cap and all, appeared at the brownstone within the hour, slipping through the rain like a man who had been born to shadows. Wolfe laid out the problem. A diamond brooch gone missing from a corpse's lapel, the police distracted by bankers dropping like poisoned flies, and a widow wringing her pearls with theatrical despair. Saul listened, nodded once, and left without fanfare. That was Saul's way. No chatter, no wisecracks, just results. While Wolfe turned his mind to lunch at 1 and orchids again at 4, I burned time writing up reports and reading the Gazette's latest mess. They were already crowing about a Wall Street curse, stringing Verrill and Fenwick together as if cyanide had signed its name in bold print. Lon Cohen sent me a note warning that the editorial board was demanding more details. Wolfe growled "phooey" when I relayed it, which meant the big man was in no mood to have the press playing detective. At 8:30 that evening, Saul came back, shaking the water from his coat. I poured myself a glass of milk and gave him the floor. Queens, Saul said simply. His voice never wasted syllables. Pawnbroker on 37th Avenue. Brooch was offered yesterday morning by a young man. Nervous, stammering, handkerchief in hand. Description fits the steward, Daniels, I whistled. Daniels again. He's racking up credits in this show. Saul nodded. Pawnbroker refused it. Said the clasp was already broken, diamonds loose. He knew it was hot. Sent the man packing. Broken clasp, I repeated. That sounds like somebody yanked it off in a hurry. Violently, Saul confirmed. Not removed with care. It changed hands under stress. I turned to Wolfe. There you go, Daniels again. He had the tray, he saw the cufflinks, he pawned the brooch. Wrap it up with string. Wolfe's eyes closed, the lids heavy with disdain. Too facile, Archie. Far too facile. Daniels is weak, timid, easily cowed. He might accept money to keep silent, but he lacks the spine for theft or the wit for pawnshops. No, he was a conduit. Someone else planted the jewel on him or forced it into his possession. Maybe, I said, but the pawnbroker's description fits him. A description is not guilt, Wolfe retorted. Descriptions are malleable, subject to the distortions of fear and haste. What matters is the brooch itself. Broken clasp, loose diamonds. That tells me more than the steward's stammering. Fritz appeared with the beer tray, foam rising like proof of ritual. Wolfe accepted his glass, sipped and continued. Jewels, Archie, are the currency of betrayal. They change hands violently, leaving scratches and broken clasps as receipts. Whoever tore that brooch from Lawrence Verrill's lapel did so with haste, not delicacy. It was theft in tumult, not in design. I leaned back. So Daniels tries to pawn it, gets turned away, and now he's sitting on a piece of evidence that could get him killed. Sounds like he's already betrayed someone. Indeed, Wolfe said, but not intentionally. He is being used. A pawn, if you will pardon the pun. The question is, by whom? I jotted Saul's report onto a memorandum, neat lines clicking under my fingers. Brooch surfaced at pawnbroker, Queens. Offered by man resembling Daniels. Refused. Clasp broken, diamonds loose. Brooch vanished again. Current location unknown. Saul gave Wolfe a nod, then departed as quietly as he had arrived. I watched him go, then turned back to the big man. So what now? We know the brooch is out there, probably floating between shady hands like a hot potato. Do we wait for it to resurface, or do I go shake Daniels until diamonds fall out of his ears? You will do neither, Wolfe said firmly. The police have Daniels under watch. Any overt move would spook him or provoke Kramer. Instead, you will cultivate the pawnbroker. A man who handles jewels daily knows their provenance. He may recall a detail he has not yet shared. And if Kramer finds out I'm haunting pawn shops? Phooey, let him bluster. Wolfe finished his beer. We are closer than he. He suspects. We will know. I closed the typewriter, rubbed my eyes. Fine. I'll take the subway to Queens tomorrow, but don't be surprised if I come back with nothing but a string of red herrings. Wolfe leaned back, belly rising like a hill in contentment. Red herrings, Archie, are valuable. They teach us who flings them. I muttered something unprintable, finished my milk, and stacked the memorandum neatly on his desk. Wolfe closed his eyes, retreating into thought. The office was quiet except for the rain against the windows and the faint hum of Manhattan outside. Somewhere across the city, Daniels was sweating through his collar, a broken brooch weighing heavier than gold. Somewhere else, a killer with anchor cufflinks was smiling at the storm he'd loosed. And in the brownstone, Wolfe drank his beer. Fritz cleared the tray, and I wondered just how many more jewels and bodies were going to change hands before we anchored this case. Dinner in the brownstone is supposed to be sacred. Fritz serves at 8 sharp, and Wolfe treats the table like a temple. But that night, the sanctity cracked. The menu was venison with a red wine reduction, followed by a delicate pear tart. Fritz had gone all out, which was his way of smoothing tension before it started. It didn't work. I'd been stewing since Saul's report about the brooch and Wolfe's too facile speech. While the big man leaned back in his chair and let Fritz hover with sauce, I finally snapped. "Wolfe," I said, carving into the venison harder than the meat deserved, "I've been running around this city chasing chanteuses, pawnbrokers and stewards. Meanwhile, bankers are dropping like overripe fruit. You sit here, sipping beer, waiting for orchids to bloom. At some point, shouldn't we do more than digest?" Fritz flinched as if I'd cursed in church. Wolfe's eyes opened slowly like shutters creaking against wind. "Archie," he said, voice icy, "you presume. Do you imagine that blundering through taverns and pawnshops produces clarity? Cases are not solved by sweat. They are solved by thought." "Tell that to Fenwick," I shot back, "or Verrill. They're both in the ground, and if this killer keeps going, half of Wall Street will be lining up for coffins. You think clarity is going to stop cyanide?" Wolfe's fork hovered in mid-air. "Your histrionics are unworthy. I require facts, Archie. Facts, not conjecture, not the press's hysteria. Until the threads converge, I will not leap. That is folly." "Folly?" I barked. "You call it folly when I drag in witnesses and cufflink lists? You call it folly when Saul traces a brooch that's hotter than a blast furnace? The only folly is sitting here pretending that beer is more important than bodies." Fritz made a sound of protest. Wolfe silenced him with a flick of his hand. His eyes were on me now, sharp as blades. "You are insubordinate," he said flatly. "You think motion equates to progress. It does not. A dog may run in circles. That is not a hunt. It is a chase." I slammed my fork down. "Maybe so, but a dog at least moves. You sit. Always sit. And I'm the one who has to run until I'm dizzy." His nostrils flared. For Wolfe, that was practically a duel at dawn. "Enough," he said, voice low but trembling with fury. "I tolerate your impertinence because you are useful, but you will not question my method. Do you understand?" The silence that followed was thick enough to slice. Fritz hovered, wringing his towel, torn between loyalty and fear. I leaned back, forcing calm into my tone. "Fine," I said. "Your method, your orchids, your timetable. But tell me this, how many more men have to die before you decide the threads have converged? Because from where I sit, we've got more red herrings than a fish market." For a moment I thought he'd explode. Instead, he set his fork down neatly, folded his napkin, and stared at me with something almost like pity. "Archie," he said slowly, "you are intelligent, but your impatience blinds you. The widow lied." That stopped me cold. "Lied? About what?" "About her husband's laughter." I blinked. "You mean her claim that Verrill was laughing minutes before he died?" "Precisely. In her grief, or in her calculation, she insisted he was seen laughing, vibrant, untroubled. Yet every witness places him in solemn conversation before the toast. No laughter, none. Wolfe's eyes glowed now, feeding on his own certainty. Therefore her testimony is false, and once a widow lies, Archie, it is not to preserve dignity, it is to conceal guilt. I whistled softly. So Mrs. Verrill isn't just a grieving widow with a taste for perfume. She's playing games. Indeed, Wolfe said, and her lie is more damning than Daniel's stammer or Cohen's headlines. It proves that she shapes reality to her needs, which means she knows more of her husband's death than she pretends. I leaned back, my anger cooling into suspicion. Then why not drag her in here and confront her? Because, Wolfe said, the time is not yet ripe. She must ripen under the heat of suspicion until her composure cracks. If we confront too soon, she will merely prevaricate further. I shook my head. You're playing chicken with a killer. You sit, you wait, you let her stew. Meanwhile, cyanide makes the rounds. Wolfe spread his hands. Better that than to flail blindly. The killer courts drama, spectacle. We must deny him both. Instead we gather, we sift, we prepare. When the moment comes, Archie, I will strike, not with haste, but with precision. Fritz finally stepped forward, collecting plates with the relief of a man removing weapons from a battlefield. Dessert arrived, pear tart with almond cream, but the flavour tasted of ashes. Wolfe ate slowly, methodically, as if the quarrel had never happened. I stared at my plate, appetite gone. When Fritz poured coffee, I pushed back my chair. Fine, Wolfe, you want patience, you've got it. But if another man dies while you're waiting for your threads, don't expect me to clap. His eyes followed me, heavy with authority. Archie, he said, voice softer now, you are my eyes and ears. Without you I am blind. Do not mistake my stillness for indifference. Every death weighs, every lie counts, and the widow's lie, remember it. I paused at the office door. I'll remember, but don't forget something yourself. Lies don't stop bullets or cyanide, and if we wait too long, we'll be chasing corpses, not killers. He closed his eyes, signalling dismissal. Fritz brought in his beer glass, froth gleaming under the lamp, ritual restored, but the air in the brownstone was cracked, jagged. I climbed the stairs, muttering to myself, dinner and a show, only Wolfe could turn venison into a battlefield. The next morning at 11 sharp, orchids concluded, Wolfe installed at his desk, and Fritz bustling somewhere in the kitchen, I set out for the Park Avenue apartment of Mrs. Gwendolen Verrill. The widow had summoned me with one of those perfume-scented notes that seemed more appropriate for an assignation than an interview. Urgent, she had written in her curlicue hand. Do come at once. Wolfe waved me out with his usual reluctance, warning, Observe her, Archie. Her words are treacherous and her beauty is a veil. The doorman in brass buttons tipped his cap as if I were delivering roses. The elevator boy was less impressed. By the time I knocked on her lacquered door, I'd rehearsed 3 ways to tell her I wasn't there to be played. She answered herself, swathed in black silk that caught the morning light like a spider's web. Pearls, of course, around her throat. Her eyes were wide, her smile tremulous, and the scent of roses trailed her like a bribe. Mr. Goodwin, she said, clutching my arm as if we were conspirators, thank heavens you came. I stepped inside. The apartment was gilded, mirrors and chandeliers reflecting wealth in every direction. It felt less like a home than a stage. She guided me to a fainting couch and perched opposite, wringing her hands just enough for effect. I can't bear it, she whispered. The police, the newspapers, the insinuations. You must tell Mr. Wolfe, he must understand. My husband was not an innocent man. He had dealings. Dealings, I repeated, crossing my legs. Funny, last time you painted him as a saint with a champagne flute. Her lips trembled. I lied. I had to, but it's true. He was involved in things, investments, secret transactions. If they come out, my name, my family. Save the melodrama, I cut in. What sort of dealings? Her gaze flickered. Banking, shipping, and Elise Fontaine. That last name she spat like a stone. I leaned forward. Elise? She blackmailed him, Mrs. Verrill hissed. That chanteuse. She had letters, evidence of his duplicity. He paid her to keep silent, but she pressed harder. I was terrified it would be exposed. That's why I came to Mr. Wolfe, not to shield my husband's honour, but to save myself. Convenient, I said. Everyone's favourite songbird makes an easy villain. It's true, she insisted, clutching her pearls so hard the strand creaked. She demanded jewels, my jewels, that brooch. He pinned it on to show her he would deliver it, and then he collapsed. I let silence hang. Her breathing quickened. Then, perhaps too eager, she added, I saw Kitteridge hand him the glass, the champagne. Personally, she blurted, a slip that didn't match her earlier tale. That hit like a cymbal crash. I kept my face blank. You saw Kitteridge give him the glass? Yes, she blurted. He leaned close, whispered something and gave it to him, and then... She caught herself, eyes wide. Perhaps I imagined... I smiled thinly. You're improving, Mrs. Verrill. First your husband laughed before dying. Now he was blackmailed by a chanteuse, and apparently Kitteridge is a waiter in his spare time. Her face stiffened. You twist my words. I don't have to. They twist themselves. She rose, pacing the rug. You don't understand. Lawrence was powerful, feared. Men envied him, women adored him. They all had reason. Elise, Fenwick, Kitteridge. They wanted him destroyed. I only wanted peace. I stood, brushing imaginary lint from my sleeve. Peace is expensive in this town. Poison and pearls, both costly. But let me give you a free word of advice. Lies are cheaper at the start. Later they compound with interest. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The chandelier above us glittered like an accomplice. I'll relay your confession, edited for clarity, I said, heading for the door. Confession? She echoed faintly. Call it what you like. Wolfe will call it useful. Outside, the neon of a luncheonette across the avenue flickered against the rainy pavement. I hailed a cab, scribbled notes on Wolfe's pad while the driver swore at traffic. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe had finished lunch and was ensconced with coffee. I delivered the report verbatim, including her slip about Kitteridge. He listened, fingers steepled, eyes closed. When I finished, he exhaled through his nose. Excellent, he murmured. Her mask cracks. Blackmail, jewels, champagne, threads of her own weaving, and the slip, Kitteridge handing the glass. That is revelation. She could not know it unless she saw it. And if she saw it, she has hidden it. Why? Maybe because she's guilty, I suggested. Perhaps. Or perhaps she fears Kitteridge. Either way, her words betray her. Wealth, Archie, is a gilded trap. It lures, it binds, it destroys. She writhes in it now. He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared with a tray of brandy, poured for Wolfe alone. Archie, Wolfe said, eyes opening, prepare a memorandum. Title it Widow's Web. Include her contradictions, her claims of blackmail, and above all her admission about Kitteridge. Tonight we will chart how the strands intersect. I set the typewriter rattling, the words crisp. Widow admits husband's shady deals. Claims Elise blackmailed him for jewels. Insists brooch was part of payoff. Slip. Saw Kitteridge hand Verrill champagne. Contradicts earlier denial. The keys clicked like gunfire until the page was filled. I tore it free, set it on his desk. Wolfe sipped his brandy, eyes heavy with thought. As for me, I leaned back, milk glass in hand, and muttered, Some web. I just hope we're not the flies. 9 to 11 in the morning belongs to Wolfe's orchids, and God help the man who forgets it. Theodore Horstman had just left the plant rooms, his shoes squeaking from the damp, and Wolfe was alone among the blossoms, sleeves rolled back, hands delicate as a jeweller's. It was the one time of day he looked almost graceful, leaning over pots of Vanda and Cattleya like a priest at the altar. Normally I wouldn't have dared interrupt, but the words had been rattling around in my head all night, and when something keeps Archie Goodwin awake, it's worth breaking a commandment. At precisely 10:15 I pushed through the glass door. Wolfe didn't look up. Archie, he said, you profane. Yeah, well, I'll risk lightning. I leaned against the bench, trying not to brush petals. That note, pearls sink fastest. We've been treating it like poetry. But what if it's geography? It doesn't mean pearls in general. It means the Adriatic pearl. The yacht. That's the stage, the sink, the whole trick. For the first time he froze, a hand hovering above a pot. Slowly he straightened, eyes narrowing. Continue. Fenwick's death, the brooch, the champagne, it all circles back to the yacht. Whoever typed that note wasn't being cute, he was leaving us a map. Everything that matters started on that boat. Wolfe moved to his stool, lowering himself with the air of a mountain settling. He clasped his hands across his stomach, orchids forgotten for the moment. "So," he murmured, "the Adriatic pearl is not symbol but locus, the epicenter." I nodded. "Which means the steward, Daniels, he's not our man. He's been dangling because someone needed a fall guy. That broken clasp on the brooch, that wasn't him. He's been passed the parcel." Wolfe's eyes glinted. "Precisely. Daniels is a pawn, frightened and pliable. He lacks the will for murder. The true killer stages him as a decoy. The anchor cufflinks were no accident. They were bait." I spread my hands. "Then who's holding the reel? Kitteridge, handing glasses around like he's head waiter? The widow spinning lies about laughter and blackmail? Or Elise hiding rhinestones in velvet pouches?" "Patience," Wolfe said, his voice low, resonant. "Consider the elements. The yacht, the champagne, the jewels, the anchors. Each is a token, a prop in a performance. The killer is dramatist as well as murderer." "And you're the critic," I muttered. He ignored me. "Yes, the Adriatic pearl. The yacht is not incidental, it is the fulcrum. Both deaths, the banker at sea, the banker at desk, were tethered by that ship. And the note is confession disguised as cleverness. Pearls sink fastest, because pearls are heavy with guilt." He rose again, looming among the orchids, the blossoms trembling under the weight of his thought. "Archie, record this. The steward is innocent. The widow lied. The chanteuse distracts. Kitteridge binds his circle with anchors. One anchor is missing. Therefore the man who lost it is the killer. He revealed himself the moment he showed his sleeve." I pulled out my notebook, the pages already full of scratches, and scribbled, "Note is yacht, not metaphor. Steward pawn, not culprit. Widow's contradictions equals concealment. Anchors equals fraternity. One missing." When I looked up, Wolfe had turned back to his orchids, fingers gently adjusting a leaf. He spoke without glancing at me. "Archie, tonight we summon them all. Kitteridge, the widow, the chanteuse, and the steward. We will convene here. The truth will be pried open." "Kramer's going to love that," I said. "Invite him too?" "He would come uninvited," Wolfe replied dryly. I grinned. "Then I'll order extra chairs. You keep your orchids, I'll keep the crowd from trampling the rug." Wolfe made a dismissive sound, which in his language meant both "go away" and "you've done well." I slipped out, notebook in hand, while he bent back over the blooms. Behind me, the glass door clicked shut. Inside, Wolfe tended orchids. Outside, Manhattan rain streaked down the windows. Somewhere in that rain, a man with anchor cufflinks was tightening his grip. By 8 that evening, the brownstone resembled less an office and more a courtroom. Chairs lined in a semicircle, suspects glowering like unwilling jurors. Fritz had set a tray of coffee on the sideboard, but nobody touched it. The air was thick with perfume, cigar smoke, and fear. Mrs. Verrill perched stiffly, pearls trembling against her throat. Elise Fontaine crossed her legs with a rustle of silk, pretending the whole thing was a rehearsal. Inspector Kramer arrived with Stebbins and the steward, Daniels, in tow. The poor fellow sweated enough to water Wolfe's and Claude Kitteridge, yacht magnate, sprawled with arrogant calm, gold anchor winking on one cuff. Inspector Kramer leaned against the mantel, cigar blazing like a signal flare, while Stebbins filled the doorway like a block of granite. Wolfe sat behind his desk, enormous and immovable, a judge robed in yellow silk. He raised a hand, and the room stilled. "Ladies and gentlemen," he intoned, "you have been summoned because a man was murdered aboard the Adriatic Pearl, and another followed him to the grave. Rumour, panic, and lies have muddied the waters. Tonight, clarity will prevail." Archie Goodwin, that's me, took my place by the wall, notebook ready, playing bailiff and stenographer rolled into one. Wolfe's eyes moved from face to face. The widow sought to preserve her husband's name, but in doing so, she lied. She claimed he laughed before his collapse, when no such thing occurred. That alone arouses suspicion, yet she did not kill him. Mrs. Verrill gasped, fingers clutching pearls. Kramer grunted but said nothing. Elise Fontaine, Wolfe continued, was accused of blackmail and seen with a velvet pouch, But her pouch held rhinestones, not diamonds, a red herring. She too did not kill him. Elise smiled faintly, though her knuckles whitened on her clutch. The steward, Wolfe went on, was bribed to silence. He feared for his life. He described anchor cufflinks. He is a pawn, not the hand that moved the piece. Daniel sagged with relief, wiping his brow. And so, Wolfe thundered, turning, we come to Mr. Claude Kitteridge. Kitteridge's smirk barely shifted. Really, Wolfe, this is melodrama. I'm a host, not a murderer. You are both, Wolfe said coldly. Your motive? Financial. Lawrence Verrill threatened to expose dealings that would ruin you. Your revenge? Personal. He mocked you before your circle. Your means? Poison in champagne. And your opportunity? The steward bribed, the tray manipulated, and those anchor cufflinks you scatter like badges of loyalty. Kitteridge's eyes narrowed. Proof, Wolfe. You can't hang a man on theatrics. Wolfe leaned forward, massive hands pressing the desk. The proof is the brooch. Torn from Verrill's lapel, its clasp broken, planted to frame his widow. Daniels, your pawn, fumbled when he tried to pawn it. The pawnbroker refused it, but the broken clasp returned to us as proof of theft in haste. And who alone could have arranged both the poison and the theft in the same instant? The host, the man handing the glass. You, Kitteridge. The magnate rose half out of his chair. This is outrageous. Lies. Phooey, Wolfe's voice cracked like a whip. You betrayed your own symbol. The steward saw anchor cufflinks at the tray, and tonight you stand here with only one, the other absent from your left cuff. You tore the brooch free with haste. You planted it to implicate the widow, and then you dared to think your yacht, your pearl, would shield you. The room froze. All eyes darted to Kitteridge's sleeves. On his right cuff gleamed a golden anchor. On the left, a plain button. His face drained of colour. I lost it. You lost it, Wolfe cut in, while committing murder. Inspector Kramer, the case is yours. Kramer ground his cigar into the ashtray, triumphant. Damn right it is. Stebbins, take him. Stebbins clamped a hand on Kitteridge's shoulder. The magnate sputtered, but the weight of the room had already condemned him. As the door slammed behind them, Wolfe exhaled, heavy as thunder after a storm. He tugged the bell cord. Fritz entered silently, bearing Wolfe's evening beer. Wolfe lifted the glass. Archie? Yeah, I said, closing my notebook. Justice, like orchids, requires cultivation. Tonight, it blooms, I grinned. And all it took was a murderer with a bad tailor. By the time Kramer slammed the door, the brownstone was back to its normal acoustics, a hush that only comes after a storm of accusations, confessions, and Wolfe's basso pronouncements. The suspects were gone, the cuffs had clicked on Claude Kitteridge, and Manhattan's rumour mills were already winding up for their midnight run. I leaned against Wolfe's desk, arms crossed. Well, boss, that wraps it. Another yacht party sunk. I'll be turning down my invitations from now on. Bad for the digestion. Wolfe didn't rise to the bait. He never does. Instead, he reached for the glass Fritz had placed, condensation beading like pearls on a string. Wolfe took a slow pull, eyes half closed as though the beer, not the solution, had brought the day's satisfaction. Kramer's cigar fumes still lingered. He'd left behind a trail of muttered oaths and one memorable parting shot about Wolfe meddling aristocratically. I'd heard worse. The real punctuation had been Wolfe's curt nod, a dismissal that only the stoutest homicide captain could survive without losing his collar buttons. Phooey, Wolfe said finally, as though stamping the case closed with 3 letters. He set the glass down precisely on its coaster. The degeneracy of wealth parading as festivity. A yacht bedecked with jewels and champagne, but rotten at its core. I will never understand the human appetite for spectacle. Come on, I said. If they didn't throw yacht parties, we'd be out of a paycheck. You like retainers as much as Fritz likes butter. That earned me a glance sharp enough to pin a butterfly. Archie, retainers are not indulgence. They are compensation for the labour of imposing order on chaos. Labour, sure, I said. Though if sitting in that chair counts as hard labour, I'll be signing up at Sing Sing tomorrow. Wolfe harumphed, a sound half growl, half sigh. He tugged the bell cord. Moments later, Fritz appeared, immaculate as ever, bearing a small plate of cheese straws. "For you, Herr Wolfe," he murmured, retreating before the argument could catch him in its draught. I snagged one. Wolfe let it slide, which was its own small victory. The office smelled of victory and tobacco, and for once the rain had stopped tapping against the windows. I opened the safe, slipped in the fat envelope Mrs. Verrill had reluctantly parted with, and spun the dial with satisfaction. A job well done, with proof in greenbacks, is the kind of closure that makes a detective sleep sounder. "You realize," I said, dropping into the red leather chair, "Kramer will be gnawing his cigar down to the label over this one. He hates it when you make him look like a bailiff in your courtroom." Wolfe waved a dismissive hand. "The police are concerned with custody, not comprehension. Captain Kramer's discontent is immaterial. The truth, Archie, was manifest. Kitteridge betrayed himself with arrogance, and arrogance as gaudy as those cufflinks." I couldn't resist. "Anchors aweigh, huh?" Wolfe groaned softly, which was as close as he came to laughter. He pushed back from the desk, massive frame rising like a ship from dry dock. "It is time for the orchids." I followed him with my eyes as he moved toward the elevator. The day had given us poisoned champagne, broken brooches, and financial sharks circling in evening wear. But here in the brownstone, ritual had reclaimed its throne. Orchids at 9, beer at 8, sanity restored by schedules. As the elevator groaned upward with Wolfe aboard, I stayed below, flipping my notebook shut. Tomorrow would bring headlines, and Lon Cohen would be begging me for colour about cufflinks and velvet pouches. But for tonight, the Adriatic Pearl had finally docked in the only harbour that mattered. Wolfe's study, where the truth surfaced and stayed surfaced. I poured myself a glass of milk, raised it toward the ceiling where Wolfe's orchids waited, and said aloud, "Here's to yacht parties. May I never attend one." The brownstone was quiet again, except for the echo of Wolfe's "Pfui," still hanging in the air like a verdict.